So here's a question. If two people read the exact same news story, the facts are identical, same words on the page, how can one person see a noble defense of democracy and the other sees an existential threat to the country?
It's a paradox, isn't it? And it's really the central question for our time. We tend to think conflict is driven by policy differences, but the argument we're looking at today suggests something deeper is at play.
Something about identity, that it's not just what we disagree on, but fundamentally who we are.
Exactly.
And on that note, we want you to discover a new in-depth approach to book coverage with this extended summary. Now, unlike our previous review, which was more of a focused analysis, this feature is a comprehensive overview. We're tracing the intellectual roots, the key arguments, and the real-world impact of the subject.
And if you appreciate this expanded format, if you find it helpful, please let us know. Your feedback is really what helps us shape future content.
Today, our source is Ezra Klein's We're Polarized, first published in 2020. It's a blend of contemporary U.S. politics, journalism, and a lot of social psychology.
Right. And the central thesis is that our polarization isn't really driven by simple disputes over issues. It's driven by how our social and cultural identities, things like race, religion, even geography, have all stacked up and aligned almost perfectly with our two political parties.
Creating what he calls these mega-identities.
That's the term. And just so you know, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's Notebook LM for deeper, more dynamic book summaries. Our mission here is to really follow the thread of this argument. How did we get from a system built for compromise to one that seems, well, optimized for conflict?
Okay, let's start with the history. The book talks about this mid-century status quo. What did American politics actually look like back then before all this sorting began?
Well, from about the 1940s through the 70s, the two parties were much less ideologically coherent. They were really just these loose, sprawling coalitions.
So you could have, say, a conservative faction and a liberal faction inside both parties.
Precisely. You'd have the classic conservative Democrat from the South or a staunchly liberal Republican from the Northeast. They coexisted.
Which meant that if you wanted to pass any major legislation, you couldn't just rely on your own party. You had to reach across the aisle.
You had to. The ideological fault lines ran through the parties, not neatly between them. That necessity forced a constant state of bargaining and coalition building. The system was, in a way, structurally designed for moderation.
So what was the catalyst? What broke that messy but, well, functional system?
The book points to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the civil rights politics that followed as the key anchor. It wasn't an overnight switch, but it triggered a decades-long massive realignment of the parties.
Especially in the South.
Especially in the South. And the result was this huge demographic and ideological sorting.
So conservative white voters and politicians began to move gradually into the Republican Party.
And at the same time, many non-white and liberal voters consolidated within the Democratic Party. The key concept here is this gradual ideological sorting. By the time we get to the 21st century, the near disappearance of conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans at a national level is almost complete.
And that's when the partisan lines start to perfectly map onto the deepest social and racial divisions in the country.
Which sets the stage for a much more emotional, much deeper conflict.
Okay, so that's the history. This is where the sorting moves from political science into our brains. Why does this alignment matter so much psychologically?
This is where the argument gets really fascinating because it connects directly to social psychology. When your politics aligns with your core identity, your race, your religion, where you live, partisanship stops being just a set of policy preferences.
It becomes a defense mechanism.
A powerful social and emotional one, yes. Humans are just. We're hardwired for group identification. Doesn't matter if it's a sports team or a political party.
We naturally favor our own side. The research on in-group, out-group bias is pretty clear on that.
It is. And we'll do it based on the most trivial cues. But when you start stacking those cues, political party plus race plus religion, you get what Klein calls mega-identities.
And that fusion means your political party isn't just one part of your life anymore. It becomes this dominant social marker that informs who you hang out with, where you live, what you watch.
So if all of those dimensions of your identity are stacked into one single partisan bucket, a political disagreement is no longer just a rational debate about, say, tax policy.
It feels like an attack.
It feels like an existential challenge to your core self, your community, your entire culture.
And that emotional charge leads directly to something called motivated reasoning. Can you explain how that works when your mega-identity feels threatened?
Motivated reasoning is basically how we process information not to find objective truth, but to protect our team. So, when our partisan identity is threatened, let's say a politician from our side is accused of something, our first instinct isn't to evaluate the evidence neutrally.
It's to defend the group.
Exactly. We immediately start generating counterarguments. We look for reasons to discredit the source, to minimize the event, to justify the behavior, anything to protect the integrity of our group. It's prioritizing tribal harmony over individual facts.
Which is why two people can look at the same data set and come to completely opposite conclusions that, surprise, surprise, always favor their own side.
And the book goes even deeper, pointing to correlations between personality traits and ideology. People with certain traits, like openness or conscientiousness, tend to cluster together socially, and those social environments then just reinforce the political views they already have.
We actively choose to live in bubbles that confirm and protect that whole identity stack.
Speaking of which, at a convenient midpoint in exploring books like this, many of our listeners turn to Mindful Moments. That's our YouTube channel offering AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques, all aimed at inspiring reflection and rational thought.
We cover underlying mechanisms just like this one, looking for the forces that define our world. And this kind of deep summary is also really valuable for aspiring authors who are trying to understand narrative structure.
So let's make that transition from the psychology of identity to the environment that feeds it. If identity is the engine, the media environment, according to this argument, is the fuel.
Right. We've moved so far away from that era of just a few shared broadcast networks, that old homogenized environment where pretty much everyone watched one of the same 3 nightly news reports. That's just gone.
It's completely fractured. It's now niche outlets, cable news, talk radio, endless digital sites and social platforms, all targeting very specific ideological groups. And the critical change is the economic incentive.
The incentives all point toward conflict.
They absolutely do.
Yeah.
Media organizations have a powerful financial motivation to serve and intensify partisan loyalties. Outrage, clear, friend-enemy narratives. That stuff reliably attracts attention and loyalty. It just pays better than nuanced, balanced reporting.
Which leads to the echo chamber effect. The most politically engaged people, the ones who vote, who donate, end up living inside these information streams that just constantly reinforce their mega-identities.
And inside those streams, the other side starts to look not just wrong, but fundamentally dangerous.
Yeah.
Alien. Unpatriotic.
Right.
And that diet of toxic information is what drives a key concept: negative partisanship.
Let's define that, because it's crucial. Negative partisanship isn't just loving your side.
No, it's being actively hostile toward the other side.
Yeah.
It means a lot of people are motivated more by their antagonism for the opposition than by any real affection for their own party.
So you're not voting for something so much as you are voting against the existential threat the other side represents.
Precisely. And that hostility supercharges emotional investment and turnout. And because those highly engaged citizens participate at the highest rates, politicians and parties have to adapt to their preferences.
They learn very quickly that compromise gets you primaried by an angry base, but confrontation gets you loyalty and media hits.
Which creates this powerful, self-reinforcing loop between the partisan media, the political elites, and their hyper-engaged audience.
Mm-hmm.
The whole system gets pushed toward confrontation, even if the average voter is more moderate.
And that confrontation slams right into the rules of the game, the institutional friction. The argument is that the architecture of American politics was built for weak parties and bargaining. But now
those old rules become weapons. That's the core clash. The book details specific institutional features that just amplify the gridlock. Take the Senate's malapportionment, which gives disproportionate power to smaller, often less diverse states.
So the majority in the Senate often doesn't actually represent the majority of Americans.
Right. Or think about primary elections. They empower the most ideologically intense voters to pick the candidates, which systematically weeds out the moderates who might be willing to compromise later on.
And then there's the big one, the filibuster.
Of course. A tool that was supposed to be a rarely used brake on impulsive action is now used routinely as a standard political weapon to stop, well, almost any legislation. It creates constant gridlock.
So this is what's meant by systemic polarization. These behaviors, the constant filibusters, the brinkmanship over government shutdowns, they're actually rational choices for politicians inside the current system.
If confrontation is what mobilizes your base and compromise risks a primary challenge, then confrontation is the only logical choice for political survival. The rules themselves incentivize division.
It's a closed system. The elites, the engaged voters, the institutions, everyone is just playing the role the structure dictates for them.
In the end, The analysis ties all of it together, identity, media, institutions, into a single self-reinforcing loop. More polarized citizens demand more polarized behavior from their leaders.
And that polarized behavior from the institutions then justifies and amplifies the division among the citizens. The system just feeds itself.
And the most dangerous consequence is how it escalates the stakes. When you perceive the other side as a genuine threat to your way of life, every single election feels catastrophic.
And if losing means the destruction of your culture, you become much more willing to tolerate extreme behavior, even norm-breaking, from your own side.
The conflict becomes zero-sum. It's all about identity. Which brings us to the fundamental question the book leaves you with. If the fight is really about identity groups in an existential struggle, is politics even about policy anymore?
It's a really challenging synthesis of where we find ourselves. For more, click the link on screen for the in-depth book critique, then subscribe, share, purchase via the link, and think rationally.
See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.